later on. Okay, so now we're ready to go. So the gradebook in D2L. Today's topics, we're going to be looking at best practices in gradebook setup. So there's still going to be some assumed knowledge, a little bit of like the basics with grading and everything here, just to take a look and speed things along. But we will talk about best practices when you're talking about your gradebook setup. We'll talk about what associations mean, what grade item associations mean in D2L and how they function, as well as just sort of general management of your gradebook in terms of creating grade items, reordering, deleting grade items, which I know has caused some confusion over the years on how to actually delete stuff. Finally, we're going to be talking about sort of just the general gradebook settings that are in D2L that you might want to take a look at or implement at various times. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So in D2L, when you go into your course the first time, your first stop on this voyage, so to speak, might be your gradebook. And that's accessed obviously through grades in the nav bar. Your setup wizard here is going to be the first thing that you're going to come to. Okay, this is most of you, if you've actually used the gradebook at any point, have probably gone through this. Very straightforward. Some of the things you're going to want to sort of, you know, decide on is whether you're going to go with a point system versus a weighted system, and whether you want to release your calculated final grade or your adjusted final grade. And I always point out when it comes to those two topics that they're two sides of the same coin. They're exclusive. You can only have one or the other. And anytime you see released in D2L, doesn't mean you're releasing final grades like at the end of the semester into Banner. No. All this means is that which of these options do you want the students to see in D2L when they look at their gradebook? Do you want them to see the system generated grade item, or the grade, sort of their percent, their cum grade for everything that they've done that the system generates? Or do you want them to see a blank grade until you manually enter the grade? So, you know, that's the decision you're making here. The automatically release final grade, that is sort of, do you want the system to keep track of all this as a cum grade for students to look back at as we go through the session or the course here? So those are the main things with the setup wizard. But like I said, I'm not going to go over too much about the setup wizard because it's pretty self-explanatory as you go through, but I do want to just highlight that specific thing because I get asked a lot about what release means in D2L and what the final calculated grade and which one I should use. Essentially, if you want to adjust it at all, go with the adjusted final grade, but at the very end of the semester. If you want the system to sort of calculate based off of how the student has done on other grade items over the course of the semester, then go with calculated final grade. And this option right here just saves you having to manually release them whenever you want them to see it. Okay. But when you come to, so if we go back here, one of the other things that we talk about a lot, and normally this is sort of like set up for one-on-one session discussions, is the actual weighting versus point values. So in D2L, you can set both of these, or you can set one or the other up. Obviously, the one mostly used in our instances is points, okay? The weighted functionality is there. It takes a little bit more setup in terms of what you need to do, but it works pretty well, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But just understand you can do both. So if we say, for example, because this is a more deep dive oriented thing, points are pretty well explanatory when you set up a point system in D2L. When you set up a weighted system, we're going to go ahead and just do that to show you how that sort of functionality would work. I'm going to go ahead and hit continue there, and then just continue. And I'm just going to breeze through the setup wizard. If you're interested in sort of this setup wizard thing, we do have some documentation and some videos on it specifically, and we've gone over it in pretty much all the overview of D2Ls that we do. So again, this session's more catered towards more in-depth looking at it. So I'm going to go ahead and set all this up and hit continue. Just get our setup done and over with for our gradebook. So now that we have that up and running, because we're set up as a weighted system here, we get a note at the top here that our final calculated grade sums to 0 rather than 100. So what that's telling us is we don't have any grade items to account for what we're doing. And within the weighted structure, you can do it a number of different ways. I personally like to use categories when helping set up a weighted system. And the main reason for that is oftentimes when you look at a syllabus that has a weighted grade system in it, you have categories set up. You have, assignments are worth 20% of the grade. Exams are worth 50% of the grade, those kinds of generalizations. And D2L sets it up so that you can sort of take what you have in your syllabus for a weighted system and plop it in just as easy. So if we hit category here, for example, I can set this to be homework, okay, as sort of a generalization category. I can then set the amount of weight this category and all the assignments under it is going to have, okay, or is going to carry with it. So say I want this to be 20% of their final grade, which is pretty heavy, but still is at 20%. From there, we can then set the distribution of all items under this category for weighting purposes. We can set it up evenly if we want all of the assignments to be evenly weighted in that 20%, or we can set up manually. So maybe some are even, some aren't, maybe they're all different weights, it's up to you. But normally speaking, we have distribute weight evenly across all of these items. This is also where you can actually set it up to drop the lowest item or the highest item if you want. But that's not just because it's a weighted system. You could do that even in a point system. You can use categories to do that, but it's just something to note here as well. So with that, we can go ahead and hit save and close. Now, as you can see, we're now up to 20% of 100%. We're not quite at that 100%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just create a catch-all category to account for the other 80% of our class here, just so we get rid of that notification at the top. So now our categories are all ready to go. Now we just need to actually build out those items that will actually be graded and go towards those weights. So if we wanted to set up a grade item under homework, say homework 1, we can do so by clicking on new item and then clicking on any of these options, numeric being the most popular one that I've seen. So we're going to go ahead and hit numeric. Okay, so under numeric, we've got, we're just going to come up with a name here. So this is going to be homework 1. All right, and this is going to go under the category of homework. Now we can enter points if we want, and you have to have at least 1 point, even in a weighted structure. Really, it doesn't matter in terms of the backend calculation in D2L how many points this is, and you can hide that point value from students if you want. It just needs to be there to facilitate the backend calculations. So I could put this at any value, but it would still ultimately be 20% of the overall course grade. So I'm just going to put it at 10 points. That's fine. And the weight is grayed out because we have set at the category level that it's evenly dispersed, or it's evenly distributed across all of the items. So it's going to set that for us as is. So I'm going to go ahead and hit just save and close here. And so now, as you can see, under homework, we have 1 homework assignment. It is 10 points, and it is 100% of this 20% weight, okay? If I would add 1 more to it, I bet you can guess what's going to happen. It's going to evenly distribute, and we'll have 2 homework assignments set to be 50% each, and so on and so forth. So what you would end up doing is you would just end up looking at your syllabus, looking at, okay, I have a homework category that's worth 20%. What assignments do I have under that homework category? I'm just going to start building out my grade items to match underneath the homework category. And the system will start calculating those weights the more you put into it if you have it set to evenly distribute. Okay? And the same thing goes for all of your subsequent weighted categories. Just go by what your syllabus does and set up those weights ahead of time, and then start building out your actual grade items themselves. Okay. Are there any questions on grade weights and sort of how that all would work? Because what we'll do is we'll switch over then and talk more about how we can associate those grade items moving forward here. So within D2L, the gradebook is separate from any of your sort of assignments, your discussions, your quizzes, and so on and so forth. Kim asks, can you pass fail in this scheme? Yes. So pass fail is in of itself a scheme. And in a weighted structure, you can set it up to also pass fail. What you would want to do is say, for example, under this homework 1 that we've created, when you scroll all the way down, there's a grade scheme that you can choose from. And at the default level, at the course level, you can set what your default scheme is. And we currently have it set to percentage. But you can choose to do a letter grade plus or minus, or letter grade non plus or minus scheme. This is set up for you already, but you can edit and create your own letter grade schemes if you wish. And the way you would do that is through the scheme button here. So if you go to grades and then schemes, there, you can edit, well, not edit these ones, but you can copy these schemes here, the letter grade plus or minus, pass fail scheme, and then actually edit them from there on out. Okay, so if we were going to do that, we're going to hit copy. Let's just copy the letter grade plus or minus. And here we now have an editable letter grade scheme that we can then choose and start editing. And the way these work, it's all based around percentages. Okay, oh, we got redo that, please. Let's try again. So I'm actually able to edit the actual default ones, but as the normal user wouldn't be able to, you have to actually copy the defaults in order to edit them. So all you have to do is come to grades, schemes, and then click on click on more actions and hit copy. And then you're given a list of the various letter grades or options that you can copy from. You probably would only see these first 3 here, and you can just choose letter grade plus or minus and hit copy. Okay, but because I already have a name like that, it's not going to let me do it unless I changed it before. But that's the general thing. So if we want to do maybe a copy of the letter grade scheme here, we can do that and hit copy. And so now under course schemes, I have 2 editable schemes that I can actually modify. And the way you would read these, because that's oftentimes a question I get, is the start percentage is when the D- will kick in. Okay, and the assigned value percentage is what it would then show if you showed percentage as well in your gradebook. Okay, so for example, any student who earns a class total, their grade comes in between 0 and 59, would be an F. A D- would count for 60 to a 62, okay, and down that list. When you're going through and changing these, what you would want to do is try to keep these columns the same, but you would say, maybe I don't want a D- to start at 60, maybe I want a D- to start at a 61, okay? And that's how you would sort of set up those scheme ranges and the thresholds there. So we're going to go ahead and cancel that. But once you've actually had that set up, you can then set any of these up as your default scheme. So if I would set, say, the course default to be the plus or minus and hit OK, what that's going to do is rather than show the students a percent on their various assignments or the final calculated grade, it would match this percent that they have to a letter grade and then show them that letter grade option. Okay. And Kim says, I always edit this scheme to align with ship final grade options. So yeah, I mean, the default schemes in here are basically set at D2L's point of view. So 9 times out of 10, yeah, I mean, you're going to run with those because that's what the university has set up. It is worth noting that whatever your scheme is that you set as a default can always be overwritten at the grade level. So if you have a specific, maybe you want to use percentage most of the time, but maybe you have a pass or fail assignment that is pass or fail, you can, on that grade item that represents that assignment, you can set that to be pass or fail and just that. And the pass or fail simply does simply looks at the same sort of rationale. Like there's going to be a back end percentage, and everything from 0 to 50 is going to be fail. 51 and up is going to be pass, and it's just going to show a pass grade. Okay. Okay. So in terms of like grade associations in D2L, like I was saying earlier, D2L, the gradebook in D2L is sort of self-contained. It is separate than from your assignments and your discussions. And the way you link those two together are through what is a grade association. And you do that at the actual assessment tool that you're working with. So for example, we've created a grade item now called homework 1, okay? This homework 1 is gonna be an assignment that students are gonna submit to me an electronic file of some sort. It could be a paper, it could be you know, a video, anything that's electronically submitted, we're gonna have that be homework 1. So what I would do is I would come into assignments and I would set up a new assignment that matches homework 1 in the gradebook. And I'm just gonna put in homework 1, like so. And I can set up instructions, I can do all that, but that's for the purpose of this video, or for the purpose of this session, we're mainly just focusing on the grade aspect of it. At the very bottom under evaluation and feedback, we can enter the score. So this is gonna be, I don't know, 10 points. And then this is gonna have a grade item selection here. Because we've already created the grade item, I just have to select this down arrow and I see all the grade items that I've created. And I can just hit homework 1, okay? And this is gonna show a preview of what this is gonna look like when students look at it in their assignment area. If I didn't have a grade item corrected or created, I could click on new grade item and set up a new one right here in the assignment area as well. But once I've done that, I can hit save and close. And so now, whenever I grade this item, the final grade is going to go to the gradebook automatically for the homework assignment, for the assignment folders. And if I look at the grade item, I can see that in my manage grades here, I can see that there's an association. Under the association column, it shows me that homework 1 is associated with an assignment. If I click on my little question mark circle to the right of assignment, I get a notification. I can see exactly which homework assignment or which assignment it's associated with. And I can see that it is assigned to homework 1. This becomes very important when you want to clean up your gradebook or delete grade items, because you can't delete grade items that have associations. So if I would come to more actions and hit delete, you can see this is grayed out and I can't actually check it. I can check homework 2 and delete that one, but I can't check homework 1. In order to delete this grade item, I would have to first disassociate it with the assignment or the assessment tool that it is associated with. Okay, and there's no easy way to do it from here. You can only check on what it is by that little tool. The way you would do that is you would go back to your tool. So in this case, we're going to go to assignments. We're going to go to homework 1. We're going to edit that assignment. And we're going to scroll down and under evaluation and feedback, just set that grade item to none and hit save and close. So once that's done, now if we go back to the gradebook, we can then delete the one we were trying to delete. Okay. That comes up quite a bit, especially with things such as like if you're importing courses from year to year, maybe you want to change an assignment or change a grade book or a grade item and you've thrown out a grade item or something. Oftentimes what will happen is you'll bring over content from a previous course and all the associations, all this stuff is all the same. and you'll just not be able to delete anything until you remove those associations. So it's very important to know that is an option when you're doing that. Alternatively, if you're looking to like reorder your gradebook, that's fairly easy as well, or it's a little bit more easy, I should say, than deleting with associations. Because even if you have associations, you can reorder. And to do that, you just click on more actions here. And from there, you can hit reorder. And the interface here is a little, if you have a lot here, it's not the most user-friendly one, but it's self-explanatory. If I want homework 2 to come before homework 1 in my gradebook, I can just set this to be 1 or this to be 2, that kind of thing, and hit save. And then that's going to reorder the gradebook for me. Okay, and this is all being done through managed grades, which is generally speaking, I believe, the default thing you come to when you first click on grades or subsequent clicks on grades. But if not, you mainly have 2 windows in the gradebook that you're going to be working in when you're in the gradebook, either manage grades or enter grades. These other things, schemes and setup wizard, you may go into these early on when you're setting up your course, but you're not really going to be messing with them after that they're sort of set up and everything. But aside from here, manage grades, this is where you would create new grade items, create categories, where you could easily see sort of your weight structure and those kinds of things. If you want to grade from managed grades, you can. Say you have an assignment that's not associated with any particular assignment or assessment tool, and you want to actually manually grade it. You can come into grades, manage grades, and then click the little down arrow to the right of the grade item you want to manually grade and hit enter grades. This is going to bring up just this one grade item and a list of all of your students. And you can set this up as 5, and Laura did 8, and hit save and close. You can also provide feedback as well there. So if I would go back over through that process. So again, grades, manage grades, homework 1, and hit enter grades. We then can modify these as well as provide feedback by clicking on the edit button here on those grade items. But again, it's worth noting that a lot of things in D2L, depending on what you're doing, are automatic exports to the gradebook, okay? So the only time that you're sort of manually entering grades in the gradebook would be if it's not tied to anything in particular, such as an assignment or a quiz or a discussion, or it's like a bonus item, that you're just putting in bonus points for whatever reason. Or you need to manually change some person's grade or add a point or do something like that. Most of the time, the gradebook is going to be self-populated based off of your grade associations from the other tools. And those other tools are where you would actually grade for those students. And I guess, what do I mean by that? Well, if we save and close here, and I go back to that assignment that we were working with earlier, and I click on edit assignment and I reset up the association for this assignment to be, say, homework 2, and hit save and close. As a student, they would go in here as a student, they would come into this class, they would go to homework 1, and they would submit to homework 1 by adding a file here. Once that file is added, you as the instructor would come into this course, you would go to the assignment area, and you would click homework 1, and you would have a list of all the assignments that have been added by students for you to grade. And you would grade from within the assignment area of the course. Once it's published from there, then it would go automatically to the gradebook. Okay? Returning to the gradebook though, enter grades is the other sort of area that you would sort of be in most of the time. I prefer doing grading manually, anything like that, from enter grades, because this gives you sort of a spreadsheet format when it comes to grading on the fly and manually. By default, you would be on the standard view of this page, and you wouldn't be able to sort of like edit any of these fields. but there's a button up here called Switch to Spreadsheet View. If you click that, it pops up. Now you actually have editable fields in here. So we could change Amber's grade to an 8. We could change Laura's grade to a 5, and we can hit save. And then that's going to update their grade, and they will then be able to see those items. All right. And you could do that for anything. Now, these columns will ultimately start getting bigger and bigger and longer and longer. So that's why you still have the option of like clicking into each column, clicking enter grades, or going to the manage grades area and entering grades that way, just to sort of avoid the masked columns that can be created as you're going through your course. But I personally do prefer this screen when doing grading, but I'm much more comfortable in sort of an Excel kind of situation when working with grades. As you can see though, one thing to note, our final calculated grade is not showing up. All we're seeing is a color here. And this is one thing that actually we get called about and emailed about a lot. And it's because D2L by default only displays to you the grade scheme color for the gradebook in any course. Every time you go into a new course, this is going to be the general setup that you're going to encounter. The way you get either your percentage or your points or your A, B, C, or D grade scheme and so on and so forth is by clicking on the settings button here in the top right-hand corner. Again, this settings button is for the grade. So anywhere you're at in grades, whether it's enter grades, manage grades, schemes, this setting button will be there and you can click on at any point. So if we click on settings, we're then greeted with all of the various options that we looked at more or less during the grade setup wizard, with some few exceptions, one of which is under the personal display options here. There's an option for grade details. And as you can see, points is shown, grade scheme color is shown, but the actual grade scheme symbol is not checked. And this is what dictates, you know, the percentage, the pass fail, the A, B, or C designation. So if you want to see that stuff, you're going to want to check grade scheme symbol and then hit save. And this is, again, just for you. This has no bearing on the actual student view either. So now that we've done that, we're going to hit close. And we're going to go back to our spreadsheet, enter grades view. And there we now have 80%. Okay. And again, it's not showing points because we're not in a point system. We're in a, you know, the weighted system. So the points are sort of more or less irrelevant to the final calculated grade area. You still see them sort of in these like the totals over here, but you just don't really see them in the final calculated grade area. All right. Are there any questions on like the various different views, manage grades, enter grades, display options, or anything like that? Well, I take a little drink here. And again, is it true that students get an email confirmation notification when they upload an assignment? This way they know that their assignment was uploaded correctly, so it will. The answer is yes, basically. Students will get a notification when they actually submit, like a confirmation that they've submitted. However, and this is always a caveat to that. Although they do get that email, I have seen students use the email from a previous submission to get to act as a confirmation for a previous thing. It is an email, it is editable, and it is manipulative. So just an FYI on that, because I have seen instructors show me emails that students have sent them where the email was sort of modified or changed in such a way as they were trying to do it to show off that it was sent or submitted or something. We'll talk in the assignment area, in the assignment session on Thursday, some of the reports that you can run from the assignment screen to sort of weed out that kind of talk, because D2L does catalog and log a lot of these tools And the assignments are one of them, where you can see the timestamp for when the student opened and started a submission and actually clicked submitted on an assignment folder. So that's usually what I, as you know, from the D2L admin point of view, and what I recommend to instructors who come to me saying that their students claiming that they've submitted something and maybe they have an email, maybe they don't. I always go to that log, because that log is what is hard coded on the back end with D2L, and it's outside the student's control. All right, but we talk about that more. We'll talk about that more on during Thursday's session. If you can't make that session, please feel free to reach out to me in a one-on-one or something. I can walk you through all that process. But yeah, so unlike certain things that are dictated that students have to opt into, because there are a number of notifications that students have to sort of opt into. Assignment submission is not one of those. That's hard coded to actually get sent to the student. But there are some options here that students can opt into for additional stuff for assignments, as you can see. Okay. All right, taking a look at my list here. For the gradebook settings. Some other settings that are kind of obscured settings, I should say, in addition to the manage display views, is if you scroll down here, there's a default grades area. And this is sort of just like personal, what you like to see when you first go to grades. If you change this to any of these options here, you can set it so that maybe you just want to see managed grades the first time when you click grades. So that's all it's doing. It's dictating what page you go to the first time you click grades, or anytime you click grades. So one of those interesting options there. Additionally, under org unit display options, we're not going to save that. When we talked about what the faculty sees, what the instructor sees with grade, scheme symbol, and scheme color, the student view is also available under org display options. So this dictates what the students will see when they look at their gradebook. Do you want them to be able to see the scheme symbol? Do you want them to see A, B, or C, or a percentage, or do you not want them to see that? Or maybe all you want them to see is how they did point-wise. So you can sort of dictate that as well. And then finally, under calculation options, here you can change your system from a weighted system to a point system on the fly. It won't hurt your sort of grade setup. You may have to tweak a couple things here or there, but overall, it's not going to harm your setup. You're not going to mess anything up if you decide to change to a point system or to a weighted system midway through the semester or anything like that. So, but this is where you would sort of set that up under your calculation options. And again, you can adjust that final grade release option here as well, and set up the ungraded items thing. I always like to mention this option as well, the ungraded item choice, because I think it's a pretty important one overall. And the general meaning here is, how do you want your grade book to record things that you've not entered yet? So at the beginning of the year, you may have set up all of your grade items. Maybe you have 10 grade items, but you haven't entered any grades for them because the students haven't done anything yet for them. This option dictates how you want D2L to use those items in a calculation. If you wanted to drop it, meaning drop ungraded items, meaning they're not available to the final calculated grade calculation, select this option right here. If you want those to be treated as zeros to the grade calculation, treat ungraded items as zeros is selected. The caution I would put on this option right here at the beginning of the semester is, if you do have those 10 items and students come into your class for the first time, they're excited, they go to their grade book, they're failing. Spot on, they have a zero and stuff like that. And there are some, maybe that's what you want, maybe that's not what you want, but just understand that that's what they would see. If this option is checked in that scenario, they would just see a dash dash. Nothing would be graded. There would be no zeros. It would be up in the air. What I've generally recommended is leaving drop ungraded items selected at the beginning of the year. And then at the very end, if you want to avoid having to put in zeros for anything that's still missing for students, you can come back in here and click treat ungraded items as zeros, and everything not graded at that point at the end of the semester will be counted as a zero, so on and so forth. Thomas, where are these options again? So Thomas, this is within the settings, the grade settings. To get to this screen, all you have to do is click on grades. And no matter which of these tabs you're in grades, on the right-hand side here is settings. And you can click on settings, and then all three of these tabs contain those options, some of those options. That particular one is under calculation options. Okay. Okay. So in terms of like availability and grade item availability, you can hide things from students. You can set up release conditions. You can set up start and end dates for things. By default, most of the grade items that you create when students view their gradebook are visible, okay? So I'm not sure if we view as student here and we look at grades, you can see this is sort of the way we currently have it defaulted to set up for student view. We can see all of the grades that we currently have and so on and so forth. If I wanted to sort of restrict these in any way possible, I can certainly do that. I can come to grades, and under manage grades, I'll have the option to hide certain things. And again, I can click on the little down arrow to anyone that I want to manipulate, any grade item that I want to manipulate, and I can choose hide from users. This manually sets it as a hidden grade item. Okay, whatever availability date-wise or release condition-wise or anything like that that you have already set for that grade item, this is going to overwrite it. This is like a manual override to any sort of availability that you set up at the grade item level. If I wanted to set up those things as sort of like date specific, say I want this grade, homework 2 to not actually be shown to students in their grade book until it's actually, available for them to submit in their assignment folders. I can do that just by clicking on edit, and under restrictions, you'll have, again, that hide from users option, which again, supersedes anything you set up down here. And then you also have the availability. So start date and end date. And in general, in D2L, availability is set up in such a way that the start date is when students see that item that you're setting up, and then end date is when they lose the ability to see that item or content. So do keep that in mind. This display in calendar option, you can certainly set this as an option. There's this option, display in calendar, is only really available in 2 different areas: the quiz tool and grades. Most of the time, you're not really putting your grade item itself with these availabilities in the calendar. Most of the other things you want to actually put on the calendar are the tools themselves, like the actual assignment folder. And those get created on your calendar, your course calendar, automatically pretty much when you create them. Okay, so you don't really have to worry too much about this. Even in a quiz setting, displaying calendar 9 times out of 10 is just going to duplicate the quiz, because the quiz also has like a due date option, and it will automatically create an option for the quiz in some ways, shape, or form. And most of the time, you just get a duplicate option if you check display in calendar. So just keep that in mind. Under release conditions, this is where you can actually set up specific conditions for this grade item to be released. Perhaps you have a merged course, for example, and this grade item is only relevant to section 2 of your merged course. You can create and attach release conditions that students have to be in a section enrollment before they can see this grade item. And those kinds of like conditional releases you can set up. And there's a number of different options. This is a very good tool to use all over your course. Pretty much every tool in D2L can set up release conditions, and you can really sort of control who's seeing your content and when, and those kinds of things. Aside from that, that would be sort of like, management in terms of the gradebook options. And there's not really much in terms of additional things. I mean, if I had to sort of like point out one more additional setting, that you've probably seen pop up here and there, and we talked about briefly early on, it would be this automatically release final grades. Because I've noticed over the course of the time I've been here, I'll be at, faculty will call, and if this option isn't selected, they'll tell me, well, their student can't see that, they can't see their final grade. It's not showing up to them. And why is that? If this isn't selected at the beginning of the semester, you then have to manually release those grades to students. Okay. The final calculated grade. If it's not manually released, or if it's not automatically released, this option from the gradebook point of view, if we go back as view a student and go to grades, this grade would be disappear. It won't be visible to them. Okay, they may see all of their actual line by line item grades, and they could, plan out and figure out what their grade is, but they wouldn't see the system grade. So in order to actually like set that up from the beginning, it's very helpful if you want them from the very beginning to see that final calculated total grade, to go to grades, go to settings, go to calculation options, and checking automatically release final grades. If you don't have that checked, okay, say you don't want it checked and you want to control that towards the end of the semester, you want to release it or something like that, the way you would manually submit those grades, or not manually submit, but manually release them, is by going to your gradebook, going to manage grades, and here you have final calculated grade. If you click on that down arrow, you can hit enter grades for the final calculated grade. And from there, you have this column all the way to the right that says released, and you have checkboxes. If you check these and hit save, it's now released to the students, they can see it. And again, that released terminology can be confusing. That just means it's now visible in D2L to students. It doesn't mean that it's been released up to banner or final grades have been submitted or anything like that. It is just about visibility in D2L. Okay. This would also be where you could manually adjust their final grade. If you wanted to switch over to the final adjusted grade, you can also do that here. So you get an idea of what they currently have from the final calculated grade, and you could even bring that over by copying it and then manually changing that grade if you wish. Okay. So all various things you can do here. Most of the time it's done automatically. And a lot of the times you're only here more or less if there's something that needs to be changed or tweaked. It is also worth noting that if you have a lot of students and you do need to manually release something, you can do so pretty quickly just by checking this box here, which selects all of your students in the class, and then hitting release, unrelease. And that's just going to toggle this option back and forth, as you can see. All right. But like I said, if you set up that automatic release final grade at the beginning of the year, you don't have to worry about this the entire semester. It'll always be available for students to view. Okay. Are there any questions on what we've talked about? Anything you were curious about the gradebook that we haven't covered? Or where something is specifically? No, I'm not seeing anything. Well, that's good to see. Must mean everything's come across super clear. But otherwise, I mean, from a standpoint of the gradebook, there are some nuances about it that can be confusing, can be, troubles, issues, those kinds of things. But in general, it's not too bad. Once you get in there, once you're using it, it's really not a bad thing to work with. And in general, whenever you're, entering grades in, they will be updated automatically. From this screen, for example, you can see just at a glance whether your students can see or not see the final grade calculation. This one's released because you can see this eyeball here. If it wasn't released, there would be a sort of an eyeball with a slash through it. Misty says, if you want to drop the lowest grade in a category, can you set that grade? Can you set that up in the grade book? Yes, yes, you can. That's actually at the category level. Okay. So if we go back to manage grades, so again, grades, manage grades, and we look at our category of homework, we can edit this and scrolling all the way down under distribution, there is a number of highest non-bonus items to drop for each user, and this one right here, number of lowest non-bonus items to drop, and so on and so forth. So that would be how you would do it. So you would have to actually create a category if you were planning on like dropping the lowest quiz grade or homework assignment or something like that. You'd have to create a category, and that rings true even if you're not doing a weighted system. Okay. One thing I will say, because that just jogged my memory of something I didn't actually go over that I wanted to, is if you're doing a bonus assignment, okay, there's two ways of doing bonus points in the gradebook, and it can be somewhat confusing. So for example, if I wanted to set this up, this homework assignment, if I wanted to make it entirely bonus, I can edit it. And scrolling all the way down here, this bonus checkbox here. This option makes the entire assignment or the entire grade item bonus, okay? If I wanted to make bonus points on, say, a quiz or something, I wouldn't set this as a bonus item because this just means this entire assignment shouldn't count against the student's final calculated grade. What I would use instead is the can exceed option. This allows me to go above and beyond the point value that I've added. So for example, if I have can exceed, 10 points is what would be the baseline. And anything beyond 10, I can add 11 points, but it's not going to harm the student in any way possible. It's just going to help that. It's going to improve their grade. So if you wanted to sort of like have a quiz that has one extra bonus point on it, so you could give, 11 out of 10, you would do can exceed for that assignment rather than bonus. Okay. Kim says the grade book can be tedious and touchy to set up, but students really appreciate having access to timely feedback on their grades, especially seeing their calculated final grade as the semester goes along. And I would not disagree with that, Kim, at all. I personally think using the grade book, I mean, it's there to benefit the students as well as yourself. I think, to be honest, the grade book in D2L, as Kim said, it can be tedious depending on how you set it up. But at sort of a baseline setup of points and just putting in grade items and entering stuff for that, it's not super tedious, in my opinion. The associations, I mean, with any online course, the bulk of the development and the tedious and time-consuming aspects are going to be in the beginning when you're setting it up. If everything is set up good and, all those things are taken into consideration in the beginning, everything should flow fairly decently, from grading an assignment, having that sent to the gradebook automatically, keeping that running total for students to check their grades so they're not constantly emailing me to find out what their grade is, or having them come to the wrong conclusion of the grade because they're calculating it improperly, those kinds of things. But all of that is dealt with, like, setting those up, because usually in my experience, when something is not working, when I've been asked, like, something's not right, something's off, oftentimes it's just a setting is missing or something was overlooked. I mean, it happens all the time. It's nothing major. And I'm sure, doing what we've done in the past with especially back in March, or, just there's a lot to go through with creating and developing these online classes. So things get missed. And that's why, when you call us or email us, we go in and we're like, oh yeah, that's just this thing. It's usually something very simple, something very easily fixed, nothing to really panic about. And that's what I always get calls or emails, people are afraid that they've completely messed up their grade book or something along those lines. And I always try to say, no, it's okay. Most of the time, everything is good. You just need to fix something here and there. And they're like, oh, that makes it so much easier. So that's what I would say. Let's see. Okay, so there are some people saying tedious, and It is, Dorlisa, it is tedious. The fact that it takes 3 actions to get one thing done. Example, I must set up your Gradebook, then go to assignments and create assignments. Yes, I will admit that D2L in sort of a functional standpoint, I get why they've kept them separate. But I remember 10 years ago when I was using Blackboard, Blackboard sort of set up your gradebook for you when you created assignments. It does allow you to have more control around certain things. You can have your one-off items, your manually created grade items, and so on and so forth. And there are some interweaving. But like I said, with anything, it's just a matter of doing it a lot. Get into the habit of it. And you don't necessarily need to set all those up bulk-wise. Like you don't have to go to your grade book, set all your grades up, go to your assignments, set all your assignments up. You don't necessarily need to do that. I prefer to do it that way, but that's just my setup procedure. That's how I like to work. You can certainly do pretty much everything if you wanted to from your content area. You don't necessarily need to go to any of these other tools or the gradebook because everything can be set up at the time of creation. So if I wanted to set up an assignment folder, I could do new assignment folder, do hello, and then scroll down here and set up under evaluation, new grade item. Hello. And set the points and set the category to be homework, hit save. And hit save and close. No, you got to actually set up the point values as well and hit save and close. So, I mean, it's all about your general workflow. I mean, if you prefer to set things up sort of at the same time while doing it, the options are there. I'm much more compartmentalized when I do things. I like to start with the grade book, get all those done, go over to the assignments, get those in, and then everything's listed there when I try to associate it. I don't have to worry about creating a new one on the fly, but you can certainly do it that way. In comparison to Blackboard, I love doing it. It has been a while since I worked in Blackboard, I will say. For those of you that are one of the things that I've always wished, and I was going to do this during our announcement or our assignment sort of look on Thursday. But for those of you that are interested, one of the recent changes that came down the pike with D2L has now made it possible to annotate right within a submission for feedback. So as an example, right there. So you now have this annotation functionality built in directly into the assignment folder, whereas before you had to like use, turn it in sort of off of D2L to sort of do annotation, or the grade app, the D2L Gradebook grader app. I can't remember the actual terminology. But now that's all able to be done right within D2L. And this is actually, I always thought it was ridiculous because this was functionality that was available 10 years ago when I was using Blackboard. So it amazed me that it took D2L so long to get this integrated into their platform. So, okay, well, that's all we've got for the grade section here. And again, with the time of these sessions, we probably didn't get through everything. And if there are any questions or anything that you want to sort of work with, feel free to reach out to me, schedule a one-on-one. I always like to work one-on-one individually with faculty because it's more tailored specifically for what you're doing in your course. We can look at your entire syllabus or your grade structure and work out what's best for you in your specific situations, as opposed to sort of just a catch-all kind of like best practices kind of format. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm using a scheduling link right now to schedule those, but you can also call or email.